Well, with me now from Washington, D.C. is the civil rights leader, Jesse Jackson, and in New York, the former head of the NYPD, Commissioner Bernard Kerik. Reverend Jackson, firstly to you, you'll remember the LA riots well, and you've been to Ferguson, Missouri. How can that community move on?
I can't hear you well.
Well, we'll try and sort that line out, but let me come back to you in just a moment. We'll try and establish communications better.
I can hear you better now.
Ah, excellent. Well, I'll ask my question again. You'll remember the LA riots very well, and you've traveled to Ferguson yourself. How can the community there move on, break the standoff between the two sides?
Well, when you have distrust and seething discontent, people feeling abandoned, it becomes like dry chips. Then some spark of brutality triggers the explosion. In the case, you look at the Kerner report in the 50 years ago, from Newark to Detroit to Chicago to LA, it was always that spark that unleashed the fury. And of course, in Ferguson, you have overwhelming and excessive force reacting to a policeman who shot a boy in the broad daylight and killed him 6 times. And so far, he's not even a suspect. Not to mention charged, he's not even a suspect. And that just compounds a sense of defiance.
You say, though, the police in Ferguson have used excessive force during the protests. Are they not just trying to ensure the safety of the community there?
No, it is excessive force to bring out the military tanks and all the military armor and the gas masks. That was unnecessary. It was so embarrassing as they swept everybody, including journalists, created a kind of international outrage. And then the next night, they pulled everybody out, and therefore the place was without any protection at all. Then the next night, it was a curfew. It looked like the police did not know what they were doing. And of course, they have a record. Although this is a community that's 70% African American, police force is 95% white, and there is a great gap between the two, and there's a cultural disconnect and outright hostility. So there is no way to integrate the police cause, gender and racial integration, because there's not enough to go around. This is, and this, I might add, the Ferguson is going to be, is a metaphor for urban America. Unless there's a more comprehensive policy to deal with unemployment and despair and police-community relations, this thing could spread. I hope it doesn't, but it certainly could.
Commissioner Kerik, Reverend Jackson there is blaming excessive police force. He said it's been the equivalent of martial law. Do you accept that?
No, not necessarily. Look, and I've been vocal on this. I disagreed with the police response on the first night. You had unarmed protesters who were obviously unarmed, protesting peacefully, and you had a response with semi-automatic weapons, aimed at some of these people. The tactical gear that was being used and brought out publicly. I think that incited a lot of the people in the community. I think it didn't. I think it really did a disservice to the situation. However, we have seen since where there has been gunfire in the crowds, there has been Molotov cocktails thrown, there has been enormous public and private property destruction by the protesters. Well, we live in a society where you have to be held accountable, and the police have to respond to force with force, and I think that's what they have done.
Reverend Jackson, they have to respond. They have no choice.
Well, it gets away from what is driving the angst. It is that this young man was shot, and for 7 days they concealed the name of the police who shot him in broad daylight. And then before they released his name, they released a tape about a robbery that had nothing to do with his being shot, because he was shot down the street later, not as a suspect, but walking across the street in his own neighborhood. And people saw that as an attempt to discredit the dead man and give some privilege to the killer cop. And then 2 days later, they released the autopsy, and there's been no apology, no contrition, no sense of reach out. It's all been by the police department. They're very defensive. I think they botched an opportunity. I think there are people in that community, black and white, who want to come together. But I've seen, in this instance, rather bad policing.
But Commissioner Kerik, beyond the incompetence, as you both have suggested, in those first days of this protest. What should the police do in a situation like this? You have experience of leading the NYPD during a uniquely anxious time in New York after 9/11. How should the police approach such times of public anxiety?
Well, first and foremost, I think that they have to be more public, and they have to communicate more with the community. I didn't see the governor out publicly until I think the third or fourth day. It may have been longer. They should be holding daily press conferences. They should be talking to the community daily. They should be in interaction with the community daily. But I want to go back to one thing the Reverend talked about, and that is the officer that was involved in the shooting. I have to stress to the people watching this show, there is a due process in this country. We live by a constitution. People are calling for justice. Well, let justice be done. Let the process take its place, and then let a grand jury decide whether this person is guilty. We have crucified him. The media, the politicians have crucified this officer. Some people calling him a murderer. That has not been determined yet. There is a process we should follow. There are laws that have to be followed. There is an investigation that's being thoroughly conducted by the local, state, and federal authorities. Let them and a grand jury make the determination of what happened, and not these political pundits, not the general public, not the critics. Let the process take its place. That is the law of this country.
Reverend Jackson.
Well, Michael Brown was denied due process. The police was judge, jury, and executioner. He was unarmed, 18 years old, in his own neighborhood, and there was no need to shoot him down and let him lie in the street and rot like a dog.
But
there was something about that was very distasteful.
But whatever the rights and wrongs of what happened, Reverend Jackson, would it not at this moment in time be right for people to see leadership? Would it not have been helpful for the president, not the attorney general, the first African-American president, to go to Ferguson and appeal for calm?
You know, I think that people do not need quietness, the absence of noise. Peace is the presence of justice. I hope that while the attorney general is there, which is a good gesture by him and by the president, I would like to think that police department is getting federal funds, and so are the firemen. They should not get any federal funds because they don't meet federal standards for fairness of gender and racial equality. You know that integrated police cars, black and white, male and female, do better judgment all of anyone in the group. And that situation is simply volatile. I hope that we will calm the fears of all the people involved. I regret that there has been the tear gas as well as the Molotov cocktails. But I think the police chief's lack of civility has been a big factor in driving things out of control.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. We must leave it there.